welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. I'm Sunanda Jai. Seal anything and everything to do with entrepreneurs. We cover it here on the show. Tonight, our Leaders of Tomorrow icon is someone who needs absolutely no introduction. He's synonymous with the auto space here in the country. His name is the one that comes up more often than not when you're talking about the automobile and the automotive sector here in the country. It's my pleasure to welcome for the first time ever around the Leaders of Tomorrow, Dr. Pawan Goenka. Where are the women entrepreneurs when it comes to even the auto space, for instance?
There's no doubt that women in the workforce, I won't call of women entrepreneurs, but let me say women in the workforce,
Sure.
got started much later in India than in most other developed countries. Okay. I remember when I was in IIT many years ago, we had in a class of 400 two women. Today, in a class of 400, there will be about 80 to 100 women. Right now, when these engineers, as they come out, obviously they will get into the workforce. So therefore, and I would say this, I will admit it is something that is changing. As you see in colleges, more and more women participants coming. The government of India is focusing very significantly on ensuring there is more equality in admission process, and maybe even setting up quotas or targets for women students coming in. So women in workforce will increase.
God forbid there is no third wave, but it's looking very likely that we're staring at a third wave, despite which a lot of us have started coming back into the workplaces. You were talking about skill sets. For anyone who's watching, not just an entrepreneur, what are those new skill sets that you think are going to become crucial in this new normal?
The first one is the digital enablement. So
Yeah,
nobody can succeed if they are not digitally connected, digital savvy, and be comfortable doing everything digital. So that's a skill set that I think, in some sense, the startup entrepreneurs had probably more than the legacy businesses. So legacy business actually are catching up, right? But other than that, there are two or three things that I think are coming out more vividly in front of us. Not something that is rocket science, not something that's totally new, but coming out
yeah,
more vividly in front of us. One is that businesses need to have a lot more nimbleness and a lot more agility, because the
sure.
environment is changing so rapidly. Gone are the days of doing almost an annual budget. Nobody can do an annual budget. We don't know what will happen 12 months from now, right? So this bringing in agility and nimbleness, the decision making, all of these things changing completely, right? Has to be. It's almost like a skill set that has to come in. I would not say that. See, obviously, the risk management becomes a very important aspect
Yeah,
as we look at these changing scenarios. The last thing that I would like to see is that the entrepreneurs stop taking risk,
sure.
because the strength that entrepreneurs have compared to many professionals is that entrepreneurs are willing to take more risk than professionals are. This should not dissuade people from not taking risk, but they have to learn to do a better risk management. That means be able to know what are the risks that they're taking and have a plan in case the risk fructifies. What are they going to do?
Sure.
So that's the second thing. Third thing that is becoming very important, and I think in this whole 15 month of off and on shutdown and so on, the supply chain management has become the differentiator for companies. Those businesses that have managed the supply chain very well have done better than others. And therefore, to learn the skill of supply chain management uh,
Yeah.
is another skill that is probably now more CEO level skill than it was earlier. That has to come in. And finally, that I would say is that defining clearly what is my customer value proposition that I'm offering. Why am I in business? Okay. Becomes even more important today. Becomes
Sure.
even more important than it was before, or has always been important. So none of these things
Okay.
are new, but they have probably increased in sort of complexity and increased in their importance.
I have a last few questions. I was recently speaking with Shobhita Gupta of Marico, and one of the viewer questions that we had got was, how do I, as a small business, compete effectively against a big business like a Marico? Because businesses like that are going to go all guns blazing. Even as things are starting to open up, even as unlocking has started, we're coming up on the festive season, coming up on the year end. How does a small business compete effectively for the same share of the market and for increasing consumer demand, because consumer confidence is coming back, people are going out, you're going to start spending, etc. So if I can broad base that question and pose it to you, your advice for a small business about just competing effectively, because it's not a level playing field, but you still need to compete.
First of all, I would even question that small business and large business, are
Okay.
they opposite? Is it either or? Right? To me, a small business and large business are complementing each other. And a large, like let's say a Mahindra, cannot do what a tier three supplier does. Can never do what a tier three supplier does, no matter how much they invest in anything. So one part is the small business is a feeder to a large business, and they
Yeah.
have a role to play, and that role will not go away. No matter what happens. So even if more investments are happening, that's not taking business away from the small business. It is expanding the large business. So that's one part of it. Second part you may say is that how will a small business that is catering to the same customer base
Yeah.
compete with a large business that has significant amount of resources that they can put
Yeah.
put behind it. So let me put it in a different perspective. Large businesses have the advantage of resources, but have a disadvantage of being large. And being large is a disadvantage because they are, no matter how well managed the business is, inefficiencies will set in, slowness will set in. A large business can never be as agile as a small business can be, right?
Sure.
And that's the benefit that they have. And if they're competing for the same customer, then that's how they
Yeah.
will compete. Now you look at the startups, okay,
Sure.
who are bringing out products competing with the large businesses in many cases, right? Tech Recently, I came to know about this company called Boat that makes headphones,
Yeah. Yeah.
BOAT. They're competing
Yeah.
very effectively. They're a small business competing very effectively with the bosses of the world.
Sure.
So I think one cannot be competing with the large business head on.
Okay.
You have to compete like this, meaning that you have to redefine the game, and redefine the rules of the game,
Sure.
and let the large business get start sweating because you have redefined the rules of the game. So I will not by any stretch of imagination say that a small business is under disadvantage compared to large business, but they have to play the game. That there are two different ways. One is a partnership with a large business when you become part of the value chain, right? Where the small business is a very important role to play. A large business cannot manage their business without a small business supporting them. And second is to uh, compete with the large business if you are in the same sort of sector where
Sure.
you take advantage of the inefficiencies that are inherent in the large business and the nimbleness that is inherent in a small business, and therefore be able to compete effectively.
Very briefly, we've been doing a series of special conversations around the IPO rush that we've been seeing. We're calling it a gold rush of sorts on the Lal Street. Even as SEBI has eased the rules for startups to start listing, do you think that this is really the start of India-born companies looking at listing first on the domestic markets? Because that's something that SEBI and pretty much everyone has spoken about previously, that a lot of businesses that are here are creating wealth for shareholders in other markets versus creating wealth here for Indian stakeholders. Do you think that's really the start that we're seeing here?
Clearly looks that way right now. And it is of course, this one IPO of Zomato probably has
Yeah.
done wonders for the uh, courage or belief of people. Other businesses do IPO, and there are many already in the pipeline that we know about that will be listing in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, including of course the big ones like LIC. But clearly the investors are giving are showing very high confidence for these startup businesses, entrepreneur-led businesses, to be able to deliver value to them. But I would also say that one has to be careful in the sense that if you go for IPO too soon, you may be giving up value that you will get if you waited for the right time. Now, I'm not an expert to know what the right time is, but there has to be enough demonstrated, proven about the business to do that. There's something else
Sure.
called spark, which is happening in the Western world in a big way these days, where people are investing very early. But let me also say that IPO is not necessarily the only route right now for getting funds. Getting
Sure.
funds from the financial institutions is probably getting a little harder because financial institutions are
Hmm.
getting somewhat risk averse because of very high NPA, and that's rightly so. I think because it is they have to deliver on the loans, but the private equity money in India right now is aplenty, and in fact there aren't enough good investments available for everybody to be able to consume the funds that they have, and therefore even to go out and woo private equity or even venture capitalists if you're in the early stage of development is equally useful route to raise funds. So I would say that one still has to be disciplined and not just rush into this gold rush of saying, let me do an IPO. Wait for the right time for the IPO. In the meantime, if you're a good business, you have equally good chances or equally good option of raising funds through private equity investment.
Dr. Goenka, I have to take a very quick break. We're back in just a moment. Welcome back. You with us here on our Leaders of Tomorrow. It's my pleasure to welcome back on the show. Joining us back is Dr. Pawan Goenka. I just want to take in some viewer queries, Dr. Goenka, before we let you go. This one is coming to us from Amar Sheikh. It's coming to us on our Facebook page. He says, I run an automotive solutions firm. Your advice on IP protection for those in the auto business as a small company. We see our employees sometimes taking our IPs, joining our competitors. He's saying joining elsewhere, I'm assuming competitors. Your advice on IP protection.
IP protection cannot be compromised with. Okay, this has been one of the big weaknesses that India has had in the past, where India was known to be a country in the Western world where IPs are not protected. But I think in the last 10 years, it's changed substantially. Government of India has put tremendous thrust on protecting IP and giving credence, giving value to IP protection, and therefore it's not a problem. And large firms will be very careful of not violating IP. They will
Okay.
be very careful. I can assure all the small companies with IPs to do that. But I think IP has to be very carefully protected by the small firm, because often for a small firm that's the only asset they have, the IP, right? And even if employees leave, and they will, you can never sort of eliminate that. You have to ensure that you have good enough protection of your IP through your filing, and also ensure that very few people, if any, know everything.
Sure.
So even walking away, even though everybody has this confidentiality clause and everything, but we know that they can be violated, unfortunately. But so even if somebody walks away, they cannot take the intellectual property with them, and the core team members, key members would know it in totality. But I think legal protection in India now is not bad at all, and the small firms shouldn't worry about it.
Sure. Two more questions I want to take in very quickly before we end today's conversation. Nikhil Arya, founder of Arya Auto Solutions, this has come to us on our Twitter page, Dr. Goenka, saying, should one look at a global expansion or export markets during COVID and post pandemic times?
Well, I would not say that COVID necessarily changes anything. Okay, I mean, first of all,
Okay.
you cannot just start looking at a market all of a sudden. So it's not like my
Sure.
domestic sales are down, so let me start exporting. It doesn't work that way, right? So if you're going to develop export market, it has to happen over the years. And more often than not, an export market will take time to turn profitable, because you will have to invest in the market development, you'll have to invest in marketing, brand building, distribution channel, and so on and so forth. So therefore, export will take time to become profitable, which is true for small firms, which is true for large firms, right? And I have always believed that yes, you should always have some level of export in your portfolio, and a number like 15-20% has been sort of my number. Of course, there are many companies that are export oriented, so I'm not talking about those, but those firms that are
Sure.
primarily domestic oriented, they should have 15-20% of portfolio on export.
Our last viewer query coming to us from Runal Sankin. She says she's a growth leader. Has the focus on the EV sector industry become more crucial? This one is coming to us on our email ID.
So the focus on the EV sector was always crucial. It was
Okay,
not giving the results, but it was always crucial because India started its EV journey on two planks. That we need to
sure.
have clean environment. Our cities are very dirty, and we need to reduce our oil import. And that was always been the primary reason why EVs are very important for India. But in spite of every attempt, every effort put in by the government in terms of various incentives that they've given, somehow the sector hasn't taken off. And
Sure.
today we should have been at least 2-3 years ahead of where we are in terms of number of vehicles that we are selling. But I'm seeing in the last 3 to 6 months significant activity happening on the EV field. Okay, um, the biggest need, people keep talking about charging
Yeah.
infrastructure, this and that. Yes, that's needed, but the biggest need is to have more products on the ground. Today, the choices for
Sure.
the customers are very limited. Whether it's four-wheeler, three-wheeler, two-wheeler, perhaps have many products, but three-wheelers, four-wheelers have very limited choices. We need to have more products, and once we have more products, given the states are doing a lot more, I think we'll take off very fast.
My last question to you, Dr. Goenka. Even as we've faced a first wave and a second wave, likely looking at the third wave, have we as a country, have we as a society learned our lessons? And I've already asked you for your advice for small businesses, but if you could give us your outlook on where you see India placed in the mid to short term, whether compared to global peers or just really recovering from the impact of the pandemic and moving forward. What do you want to leave us with?
So there are many parts to it. Okay.
Yeah,
Of course, a few months ago, we were in this deep oxygen crisis. That is thankfully behind us now. Month and a half ago, we were in deep vaccine crisis. That I think is more or less under control now, and we have, though this little patchy, but reasonably okay with that. But unfortunately, what we have not yet learned, and I feel very sad about it, is that a general population does not understand that the COVID appropriate behavior is the most potent weapon to stop third wave from coming in. And I still see on the streets, in gatherings, people just crowding, not wearing masks, and so on and so forth. It's such a simple thing, and something that you have to realize that you are playing with your own life, not somebody else's. And I think the COVID appropriate behavior will do a great thing in terms of helping us to reduce the spread of COVID and not have a strong third wave. Having said all of that, I think to some extent, India is further ahead in terms of COVID fight because we have had a very strong second wave. We have, to some extent, left Delta behind, whereas many other countries now are facing the wrath of Delta. Right. So again, I'm not an expert, and I'm talking like a layman, and medical experts may find a lot of flaw in what I'm saying. But having done that, and if we are able to get our vaccination program going the way it is planned, and if the COVID appropriate behavior comes in, I, as an optimist, want to think that the third wave, if at all, will be a mild third wave and will not disrupt our life. Right. And if that happens, then all the projections that we have been talking about of 8 to 10% GDP growth this year will come true because
sure.
our demand is coming back fairly rapidly We have just about getting out of second wave, and our demand is already coming back very rapidly. And if we get to the 8 to 10% growth, we'll be one of the very few economies in the world this year that'll get to that point. And then I think then we are on our way. Our resilience of our society is very large, very high. We don't appreciate sometimes how resilient our society is, and many of the natural calamities does not sort of leave a trace behind once it's over, whereas in many Western countries it is sort of in people's mind for a long time.
On that very optimistic note, Dr. Goenka, such a pleasure having you here on the Leaders of Tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure, nice to talk to you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, Nanda.
All right, that's all we could put into this episode. Thank you so much for watching. As always, we love hearing from you, the viewer. If you have any feedback for us, do let us know. Our contact details on your screens as we speak. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.